Chapter 41. A Risky Betrayal. Dread's Keep, the 4th level. 2 pistols, a sword, and an ammo belt laid on the ground in front of the corpse of Thornscale. Crinan looked down at them. They had been his before he had killed Thornscale in Respawn back at the 1st level of the Hells. He called Karsten over, handed him the pistol that had been gifted, and scooped up his old equipment. He holstered the pistol on his ribs, clipped on his ammo belt, and put the sword on his back. The blue light from the portal that remained open shone on Crinan. He stared at it for a moment, feeling grateful that he had made it back. He was finally caught up to where he had been, finally able to continue to the end.
Congratulations, citizen. Your faith in Dura Ana and our great Emperor Sidro have led you to the end of Thornscale's trials. You have proven that you are strong and diligent enough to overcome even the greatest of odds. For that, you are to be commended. When you log out, please visit your local Inquisitor station, and you will be provided with new job opportunities. Now, walk through the portal and enter the 5th level. You have earned it. Pending abilities available. Portal, level 4. Portal, level 5. Portal, abilities re-enabled.
Job opportunities, Crinan snorted. Yeah, right. He didn't even want to think about what kind of job a citizen would be offered for having done what he did. 3 more levels, he said softly to the others. We're almost there. Then we must not tarry, child, Eon replied. Come, arise, let us venture forth into the unknown, that we may finish this. Crinan grunted as he stood. He was tired, not physically, but mentally. He felt like he had spent a lifetime fighting. The end was so close, and all Crinan wanted to do was rest. He looked over at Karsten, though, and sighed. The old blood rancher had spent literal lifetimes in the Hells. He had fought, lost his mind, sought his loved ones, and ultimately given up so that he could have a chance at peace in Sincroft. Crinan realized as he looked at him that he didn't deserve to rest. He stood to his full height and took a deep breath. Then let's go, he said. He turned toward the portal and immediately thought of those who were waiting for him. He thought of Edmund and Dimian, the knights who had impacted his life so greatly when he was younger. He wanted to make them proud, to show them that he was strong and that Edmund's teachings hadn't gone to waste. And then Crinan thought of Malinka. I have to find her, Crinan whispered to himself. He would not let her down again. He would find her like he had promised so long ago. There was simply no question in his mind about what he needed to do. He would not leave the Hells without her. Come on, Crinan said as he approached the portal. Time to go. He watched as Ander and Eon both passed through the portal and then stepped forward himself. Before he could pass through, however, Sage spoke.
Crinan, can you hear me?
Sage all but shouted.
Can you hear me, Crinan?
Yeah, I'm here. What? Crinan asked, a bit annoyed.
Listen to me very carefully,
Sage implored.
You have to get away from Eon. I wish I had known that Ander was him sooner. Had I known...
Yeah, he's fucking crazy, Crinan agreed. But how?
That skipping stone in your pocket,
Sage said.
When you get to the 5th level, use it immediately.
I can't just leave the others behind, Crinan argued. I won't abandon Malinka.
Crinan, I understand that you love her, but you cannot allow Eon to get to the 7th level,
Sage shouted.
He must not leave the Hells.
Look, I'll do everything I can, Crinan said, but none of this is happening without Malinka.
You do not know what you speak of,
Sage growled.
If only you realized what kind of power Eon truly has.
Sage, I'm getting Malinka, Crinan said, cutting him off. There's no question about it. I haven't truly loved
anyone but myself my entire life. I can't just run away now. I'm doing this.
I understand,
Sage replied with a defeated tone.
Truly, I do. Look, if I cannot convince you to skip the 5th level, then please, find Malenka, and then do whatever you can to get away from him. Remember, once you pass through a portal you create, it closes.
Great. Crinan rolled his eyes. Is there anything else important I need to know?
Dolly is your sister?
Sage replied. Yeah, figured that out already, Crinan said.
Then no,
Sage said.
Finish your journey. I will be waiting for you on the other side.
Okay, Sage, Crinan said. He looked back up at the portal in front of him and sighed. Hey, Sage.
Yes, Crinan?
I guess I haven't said this yet, but... Crinan fidgeted nervously, hating the taste of the words on his tongue. Thank you, I guess. Sage fell silent for a moment, but eventually replied.
I owe it to you,
Sage nearly whispered.
Now, we both have to go. Get moving, Crinan. I will see you soon.
At that, Sage fell silent, and Crinan walked through the portal. The 5th level. Crinan stepped out of the portal and into a field of crimson grass. The sky above him was gray. The 5th level was a bit brighter than any of the preceding levels. Crinan looked around, appreciating the landscape more than he had any of the others. This isn't so bad, he said with a shrug of his shoulders. Kind of nice. Atop a nearby hill, Crinan saw the upright forms of Karsten and Eon. He jogged toward them, quickly climbing the hill. As he neared, he noticed that they were staring down into a valley. He walked up next to them and glanced down to discover what they were looking at. What? Crinan shouted. He saw hundreds, perhaps thousands of players gathered in the valley below. They were engaged in combat with another army, a horde of shrieking and screaming touched that scrambled in a large mass toward them. The players were easily outnumbered 10-1, but they were, at least for the moment, holding back the feeble bodies of the insane yet empowered prisoners that were assaulting them. What is going on? Crinan asked, mesmerized by the battle.
The touched are hunting, Karsten replied. They've learned that they can kill. They're massing together by instinct, I reckon. By the brothers, look at them. It's like an ocean.
There's so many, Crinan replied. So many people that have been driven to insanity here, after all the years of torture and pain. Crinan shook his head at the sight, and they surveyed the player encampment below. These are the players who killed Black Knight back at Dread's Keep. I would venture to guess that is a correct assessment, Eon said. They killed, and then they moved on. They had no reason to enter the keep. So, they're out hunting prisoners then, Crinan realized. He snorted. Guess they found them. Karsten chuckled alongside Crinan at the situation that the players had found themselves in. Karsten reached out and patted Crinan's shoulder.
All right then, let's get away from here. We got ground to cover.
Crinan nodded and turned to leave, but something caught his eye. He stopped walking and squinted at a large group of about 50 or 60 people sitting on the ground. Their hands were bound and their heads were lowered. Prisoners, Crinan whispered. They're taking prisoners. Why?
You don't want to know,
Karsten called over to him.
Remember, the hells is where these players come to sin.
Oh, fuck no. Crinan snapped as he started running forward. No, Malenka could be in there. I'm not leaving them to get raped or tortured by the players. This shit is getting shut down.
Crinan, wait!
Karsten shouted after him, but Crinan ignored him. He ran down the hill, and when he reached flat ground again, he drew his sword. He sprinted forward in the direction of the cluster of prisoners. It didn't take long for one of the 3 guards to notice him. When he did, he ran forward to engage Krynen.
Dumbass,
Krynen snorted as he readied his weapon. Within a matter of moments, Krynen and the player had reached each other. The player swiped his 2-handed axe at him, and Krynen stepped to the side, evading the attack. He quickly swiped at the back of the player's neck, severing his spine, and ended his life.
Player Ducky 9689 executed. Player rank 9,977,158,546. No rank change. Current rank 3,327,396,763. Current percentile 11%.
The other 2 guards approached. Krynen didn't have time to fight. He dropped his sword, drew his pistols, and fired on each of them until they were on the ground. Afterward, he holstered his weapons, retrieved his sword, and brained both the players to make sure they stayed down.
Player Pious Venom 0666 executed. Player rank 11,187,589,577. Player Outhouse 69 executed. Player rank 8,977,668,141. No rank change. Current rank 3,327,396,763. Current percentile 11%.
Idiots, Krynen snorted as he ran away from their bodies. It wasn't long before he had entered the players' camp and approached the group of prisoners.
Come on,
Krynen shouted at the nearest one.
Get on your feet. Time to get out of here.
He ran up and cut the rope that bound the prisoner's hand.
Here, take this.
He handed over one of his 2 swords and pointed at everyone else.
Cut them free. Hurry, we don't have time to waste.
Who are you? The prisoner Krynen had freed shouted. By then, the other prisoners had noticed the commotion and gotten to their feet as well.
Krynen,
he replied.
I'm a friend.
Krynen started cutting through more bindings. He looked over and saw Eon and Karsten keeping watch.
Karsten, come help,
Krynen said to him.
Let's get this done.
On it,
Karsten replied, pulling his knife from the sheath on his belt. He ran over and started freeing prisoners left and right.
Don't push, fucker,
Krynen yelled at one of them.
Just wait your turn.
He cut another rope, freeing another prisoner, and they hurried and gathered about 10 feet away.
Come on,
Krynen was suddenly cut off as he heard the sound of footsteps running toward him. He quickly turned, ready to fight, only to find Malinka standing there in front of him. Krynen gasped. He dropped his sword and reached his hands up. Placing a palm on each of her cheeks, he pulled her in and pressed his lips against hers.
Krynen,
Malinka cried softly as their lips briefly parted.
I thought it was over. I thought you were gone for good.
Yeah, well, I made a promise to someone a long time ago, he whispered back, that I would find her one day.
Nope,
Malinka said with a grin.
You already broke that promise.
She leaned in and kissed him again.
But here's to second, or, well, third chances now, right?
Krynen couldn't help but smile. He placed his hand on the back of her head and held her tight.
Okay,
he whispered into her ear.
Yeah, third chances.
Karsten cleared his throat next to them, and they quickly let go of each other. Malinka cocked her head at the sight of the elf, and a wide smile formed on her face.
I am so happy to see you again, Lord Karsten,
Malinka said with tears in her eyes.
I guess Krynen dragged you with him this time?
You too, madam.
Karsten nodded his head and couldn't fight the smile that formed on his own face.
Yeah, he definitely is a little shit stain, ain't he?
Truer words have never been spoken.
Malinka held her hands out, and Karsten cut the ropes that bound them. He gave her a wink and then turned to the next prisoner.
We have been found, Eon declared from behind Krynen. I will keep them at bay.
Krynen glanced over and saw that a detachment from the player army was rushing toward them from the battlefield. Bodies began exploding in the distance, and blood flew into the air like fireworks. Krynen frowned as he turned to Malinka.
"Where are the others?"
he asked.
"Edmund, Demian."
They didn't make it.
Malinka sighed.
Players cut through them.
"Damn it,"
Krynen hissed. He looked over at Karsten and frowned. Quickly, he picked up his sword and helped the elf cut through the rest of the prisoners' bindings. He sent them to the hill and then turned toward Karsten and Malinka.
"We're leaving,"
Krynen whispered to both of them.
"Now."
"Without him?"
Karsten asked, a hopeful tone in his voice.
"How? We don't have a portal."
"I do,"
Krynen said. He reached into his pocket and produced the skipping stone that Grizzly had gifted him back in the Blood Games.
"We're going to the 6th level. All of us."
"Prisoners too?"
Karsten asked.
"Sure."
Krynen nodded. He grabbed Malinka's hand and led her over to the prisoners. He dropped the stone on the ground, stomped on it, and then started pushing the prisoners inside.
"Go,"
he whispered sharply to them.
"Get through, everyone. Hurry up."
Krynen glanced back at Eon and noticed he was busy blowing people up. It didn't take long for the majority of the prisoners to pass through the portal, but when there were a handful left, Eon turned his head. Krynen locked eyes with the Vomprey, and for a moment they stared at each other. Krynen wore a look of guilt, though he didn't regret what he was doing. Eon simply shook his head and waved a finger in Krynen's direction. For a single tense second, Krynen held the gaze, and then he felt Malinka tug on his arm. When he was pulled back to the moment, Krynen knew Eon could have ended him right then and there. Finally, he nervously looked away from Eon and hurried through the portal.